Welcome to Starter TV. I'm Chitra Nabat. Joining us today is Ken Rees, CEO of Elevate. Ken, thank you so much for joining us on Starter TV.
Thanks, Chitra.
Ken, financial services, you're an industry veteran, over 15 years in the business. What made you decide to sink your teeth into financial services?
Well, I've always been really interested in how technology can be used in underserved industries to revolutionize them. And I first started taking technology into financial services actually in the late 90s, trying to understand how we could take over a business that was doing check cashing and completely innovate in that business, and then have done the same thing in lending recently.
You talk about innovation. I know you've started companies. What has been critical to your success in this industry?
I was lucky and started in industry as a management consultant, had lots of different projects looking at all different aspects of business, and I think that's helped me be successful in this world where we face so many challenges all the time, different regulatory changes, different technology changes, and I think I've been able to really respond quickly to those changes and ultimately be successful.
In most industries, careers, people have mentors, sponsors. Is there a difference for you, and have you had mentors or sponsors?
I would say mentors, and it's interesting to use the difference between sponsor, because I think of sponsor as something that's officially designated, whereas a mentor is someone you build a connection to. And in particular, starting with management consulting, I had lots of bosses, lots of people I worked with, and I was always able to learn individual things from each of them. Sometimes I learned stuff I never wanted to do that they were doing. Other things, there were things I wanted to do that they were doing, and I think over time it's helped me be a more rounded leader. What
roles did mentors and sponsors play in your career?
I would say the best ones have been the ones that have challenged me the most and have really set the bar very high. And I think that's something I look for my team as well. People that don't want to stay doing the same thing over and over again, aren't happy with just being good at what they do today, but are always pushing themselves to the next level.
Do mentors pick you, or do you pick them? And how do you develop that relationship?
I think it has to be real. I think there are a lot of programs and companies that try to artificially put people together, and I don't necessarily think it works. Sheryl Sandberg, in fact, talks about that in Lean In. I think she's right. It has to be a real relationship. What we do is try to create management training programs that give people in our company a lot of exposure to both their peers and members of senior management, with the hope that there will be these connections that click and people can then turn to both peers and other leaders in the company to help them along the way as they grow in their careers.
You talk about training, whether it's at Elevate or broadly in financial services. What are the attributes, the skills required for people to be successful in this kind of business?
Of course, in a financial services business with as much technology as we have, things are always changing. So we do a lot of, I would say, the basic skills training for everybody in the company. But in addition to that, we do a lot to try to identify the up-and-coming leaders of the future and provide them with a lot of coaching and mentorship. So we do a lot of 360s. We bring in people that can help them understand their personality profiles and how to be successful. And I think most companies don't do that, and you end up with this incredibly talented set of people that have a potential that are never able to really deliver on it because they don't get that support and oftentimes end up languishing. So we try to identify those top 10% people that can make a real difference in the company in both today and in the future, and invest heavily in them.
You've been super successful as a CEO, distinguished track record. What is the one proudest professional accomplishment you have?
Well, certainly selling my last company. I started my first company as a startup CEO, 2001, terrible investment time, and grew that company serving an unmet need to the point that it was bought by GE 3 years later. And that was a time that tested me. I was paying for the salaries of the people that worked for me. I was learning a lot of things. I was having a lot of failures along the way, and managed to just keep pushing at it to the point where it was intriguing to GE to buy. And I think that has been something that gave me a lot of confidence that even sort of in the toughest environment, facing pressures that I was sort of foolishly took on. I don't think I realized just how hard it was going to be a startup entrepreneur in that investment environment. Gave me a lot of confidence for the things we deal with today on a day-to-day basis.
And switching to the personal side, a personal proud moment for you?
Well, certainly staying married for over 20 years is a huge accomplishment.
What's your tip on a successful 20-plus year marriage?
Boy, if I had a tip, it would make it seem like it's been easy for even a single day along the way. I think just like business, you just keep plugging away, and eventually it'll work out.
So let's talk about some serious business. Elevate. Tell us about this company.
Yeah, so Elevate is an online financial services provider. We serve consumers who are not well served by banks and traditional financial providers.
And how exactly does that work practically?
So we have 3 online products, 2 in the US, Rees and Elastic, and 1 in the UK called Sunny. And consumers find us through direct mail campaigns, through TV spots, through online marketing, and come to us for better financial options than they oftentimes have. So we're dealing with subprime consumers who, in many cases, will be stuck with payday loans and pawn loans and title loans. And they can come to us, get a lower rate, and begin a financial journey to hopefully get them closer to financial health than they were before.
So your products are not payday loans, not pawn loans, which is an important differentiator. Exactly how does your financial products, how do they work? A sense of the terms, and so people can really kind of touch and feel your product.
Yeah, so our products range from somebody who needs just a little bit of money, a couple $100 to $10,000. The rates typically can be as high as maybe half of a payday loan and as low as 36%. So we serve a pretty broad credit spectrum of consumers that aren't being treated well by the banks because the banks are looking only for the highest quality credit, but don't have interest in the dead-end products like payday loans and pawn loans. And we try to both serve that immediate term need with a fast approval process, a very dignified interaction with us. They don't have to stand in line at a brick and mortar location, but also provide them tools like credit monitoring, reporting to credit bureaus, and even financial literacy videos so that hopefully over time they can improve. And then we also offer lower rates over time. So a customer that might have at one time had a payday loan with us, after a couple loans, they can be down to 36%, which for this customer base is absolutely transformative in their financial well-being.
How do you actually help your customers get out of that endless debt cycle?
Yeah, well, one of the worst aspects of the traditional payday loan industry is they don't report to credit bureaus. So you can have a customer who maybe had damaged credit in the past, they couldn't pay their credit card bills, and all of a sudden they don't have access to traditional credit. But they really want to improve, and their payday loan bills over and over again on time, and yet that's not helping them because traditional payday lenders don't report. So we report to the bureaus. We try to help consumers build back their credit rating. And we provide lower rates over time with successful payment history, but we also help them get access to other products. And hopefully many of our customers graduate back into traditional credit products.
Well, actually you talk about that, so access to better, more traditional products. So in that, what's that intermediate zone that your target client is in where they're your sweet spot?
Well, you know, our customer, we now refer to them as the new middle class, because it used to be customers that were subprime were sort of very different from the rest of America. You know, they had less wealth and various other problems. What we find now is our customer looks like very much mainstream America. $35,000 to $50,000 household income. 80% have gone to college. Typically, we skew maybe a little bit younger. But what's driving the market for our products is a statistic about the US that's pretty amazing, but half of Americans now say they have less than $1,000 in savings in case of a financial emergency. That says that for millions of Americans, if any sort of hiccup happens, their child needs to go to the doctor or their car breaks down, that can be a very crippling financial situation, and they're looking for alternative products. And as we said, banks and traditional credit providers have pulled away from this customer base. So there's a large unmet need in the US, and we're really the first of the providers to start trying to find interim solutions, not perfect for perfect credit, not for such damaged credit that payday loans are the only alternative, but this large credit spectrum that needs products that can help them manage from their current situation to hopefully sometime in the future a better financial future.
What do you think though it will take to change with the new middle class for traditional bank lenders to return to them more robustly?
That is a terrific question, and I'm not sure that the traditional lenders are anytime soon going to move back. I think what it's going to take are more innovators like us who are using new technology, new big data to underwrite consumers better, and to come up with more responsible products like this, the ones we're trying to do that are going to fill this unmet need for consumers. Because unfortunately, I don't see the old traditional providers, the big banks, to really anytime soon get interested in serving the deep subprime consumer.
How much, though, do you think it's lack of interest versus just fundamental lack of credit worthiness? Because a lot of the big bank executives, when they're on the news or speaking to the government, they say, look, we're happy to lend, we just can't find people, consumers to lend to. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's because they've tightened up their credit requirements so much that no surprise they're not finding as many. And I think it's not necessarily that banks don't want to innovate. I think banks have regulatory pressures on them, in particular after the economic crisis, that it's made it hard for them to try to do new things. You can't help but read in the newspaper about bank being fined for something they're trying to do, and in many cases they were just trying to grow their business and try new things. And it's a tough environment, but that's, I think, all the more reason why non-bank lenders, and in particular technology-based non-bank lenders, can really innovate new products and get into this market opportunity that's out there.
So you talk about innovation. When people think about financial services, banks, lending, they don't really think about innovation. And so how does your company approach innovation? And you talk about technology being a driver. How does that come together for you?
Well, actually, I think there is a fair amount of innovation in financial services, but it's still primarily innovation for the well-banked and well-to-do. You have Lending Club that's doing terrific things for customers with FICO scores better than 650. And what we're hoping to do is really be part of that next generation of lenders that's taking a lot of the technology that's revolutionizing mainstream credit and put it into the non-mainstream area, the alternative program. For us, though, I think we start innovation trying to understand an unmet opportunity. So, you look at payday loans and pawn loans and title loans, and you have to think there's got to be a better way to do this. And then we try to talk to both consumers and consumer groups. So we work right now, we've met with consumer groups like Pew and Center for Responsible Lending, people that have not historically been big fans of this industry, to try to understand what we can do to eliminate the consumer pain that they're worried about. How can we create a next generation of products that's more responsible, that addresses their, in many cases, very valid concerns about the industry. And then we try to work around that and build the technology that supports that. For us, a big piece is constant investment in big data analytics. That's what ultimately we think is going to help us to be able to provide credit at lower rates than what our competition can provide.
So when you talk about big data analytics, how exactly are you using that? A lot of CEOs and all kinds of industries talk about, big data, it's all about big data, that's the future, but no one can really explain on a practical level how they're actually applying big data to help with customer targeting or whatever the case is. So can you flesh that out for us?
It's a great point. It's become a cliche, but for us it's become real. When a bank looks at you to decide if it's going to give you a credit card, it looks at big top 3 bureau data. So it looks at information from Experian or TransUnion. Then if you go to a payday loan, they're going to look to small targeted subprime credit bureaus. There's companies like Clarity and Microbilt that they look at. What we try to do is take both the big bureau data, the targeted small bureau data, and then overlay a bunch of alternative data sources like social media, like information about your bank account, information even on how did you use our website? Did you look at a bunch of informative pages when you came to our website, or did you go immediately to the application? All of these things can inform the decision about whether the customer is who they say they are, whether they have the ability to pay their loan, and just as importantly, whether they have the willingness to pay off their loan. So we build a series of targeted scores on each of these things using thousands of data points from, as I said, big bureau, small bureau, and alternate data sources, and we're always looking for new data sources. In fact, we have a team in San Diego that does nothing but that.
You actually talked about something there, social media. So what social media data components, how do you actually bring that into this vetting process?
Fortunately for lenders and other providers, there's now just increasing numbers of providers that will package up information from all sorts of sources, including social media. But an easy example is if you have and
when you say social media, do you mean Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn?
Sure, all the above.
All the above, okay.
And it makes sense. If you have a robust social footprint, you're probably more likely to be who you say you are than a made-up identity, because it's you may be able, as a crook, be able to identify a social security number, but you can't necessarily build a history around that Social Security number. And that's part of what we look for as we try to identify whether that customer is who they say they are. You know, when an old-fashioned lender got to see a driver's license and a bank statement, a pay stub, and got to talk to that customer, we have to, just based on the application information, make an instantaneous decision whether to give $10,000 to that customer. And that takes a lot of sophistication and a lot of basically any new type of data we can get that helps even marginally improve our credit scores.
So when it comes to this portfolio of expertise, right, of people that you have, how does technology and big data actually unlock cost effectiveness for your organization? And what's the impact? Can you quantify the impact?
Yeah. The old-fashioned industries that are out there have this extremely expensive cost structure of brick and mortar locations. And that obviously is a big advantage we have. We don't have that operating expense. But then you've also just got losses. So if you look at most lenders, you're going to have your revenue, then you've got losses, and then you got sort of brick and mortar expenses. We get rid of the brick and mortar expenses. We do everything we can to use our advanced technology and analytics, drive down our losses, and then what that allows us to do is drop the rate to our customers. So we actually don't take our improvements in underwriting in terms of better margin. We typically take that in terms of better pricing to consumers.
So that means investment into technology and into big data analytics is significant for your company.
Yeah, and even just pure R&D. We have a team in San Diego that does nothing but look at alternate data sources and alternate analytical techniques to see what they can do for us. And that's, I think, one of the ways we've been successful, because it's so easy for all of your resources to go into the day-to-day. In particular, for a fast-paced growing company like ours, it's a little bit overwhelming just to support the daily activities that you have. And we're very lucky to have a standalone team of PhDs and data scientists that can think more deeply about where we're going as a company and what sort of capabilities we have to build. And I believe the biggest, from an underwriting perspective in our space, with 50 people in risk, 25 advanced degree statisticians, and 15 PhDs.
What's next for Elevate in terms of your growth and rollout strategy?
Well, we've seen pretty remarkable growth. So, for instance, Rees has only been in the market for less than 2 years. We've already originated almost $500 million worth of credit to consumers in the U.S., and we've saved them almost $250 million over what they would have spent on payday loans. So it's been a huge success. I think we are going to continue to focus, first and foremost, on growing our 3 products, Rise, Sunny, and Elastic. But we're also looking at new product opportunities. I think there's a huge opportunity to continue to find new products to fit unique needs within that credit spectrum between the customers who are served by traditional bank products and the customers who are struggling to find better alternatives than payday loans.
And on a very practical level, I know you talked earlier that the rates can be half of payday. In an optimal situation, kind of best credit worthy scenario, what are like the low side of the rates?
Well, for us,
like approximately how much percentage?
Our endpoint where we think we can get customers is 36%, and our commitment is that every customer on Rise, after a period of successful payment history with us, will get to 36%. Now, that's not prime credit, but that gets them very close, and that's the point where they have more options. Well, if you think about a payday loan, which may be 400 or 500%, they've been able to take their rates that they were paying down by 90% or more, and they can start thinking about, well, is it time now to get back into traditional credit cards or other credit alternatives?
Are you lending in all states in the United States?
With Rise, we just operate in 15 states. We're adding 2 more states soon. The Elastic product is in most of the US, and then our Sunny product is in the UK.
And more international expansion coming?
We're looking into that as well. There's really interesting opportunities in South and Central America, other parts of Europe, but for now we think we have our plate filled with the UK and the US.
Overall, do you see any kind of skill gap when it comes to finding talent?
From my personal perspective, the hardest thing to hire for is culture. There's lots of smart people out there, lots of people that want to do something interesting, and particularly for an organization like ours with a lot of growth and a lot of technology and a lot of analytics, there's a lot of people who would like to be part of that. But we really hire, I think, as much for cultural and capabilities as we do for specific skill sets.
Culture, though, is something very intangible, right? So when you say it's hard to hire for culture, how do you then solve for that?
We actually think it can be specified. For us, we've got 4 cultural traits that we think are meaningful. think big, always improve, do the right thing, and win together. And we actually, in the interview process, we specifically have to identify how people adhere to each of those things. Are they innovators? And even people in customer support, we want people who are thinking big and pushing themselves. Are they not interested in being complacent, like always pushing themselves to try something harder? That's in the always improve. Certainly ethics in our industry is incredibly important, so do the right thing. But probably the hardest one is the win together. Not enough people really understand how to work effectively on teams and understand it's not about them personally, it's about the success of the organization as a whole. And when we find those people, and they're not that easy to find, and it takes us a hard time to find them, we can really keep them in our organization, and we find that these are the people we want to invest in to make them successful as they will continue to drive the growth of the company.
When I interview a lot of CEOs and they espouse these similar values, right? Think big, we want your ideas, team play. But the reality is on the ground, so many people, whether it's the entry-level folks, mid-level folks, are caught in a major conflict because when they bring forward those big ideas, the middle management or other levels above them feel threatened, and they beat those big ideas away, beat away the concept of team play. Like, this is a very pervasive issue in corporate culture across this country and many countries. How do you...
You're exactly right. So many executives give lip service to it, but they're not willing to hear the real results. So we do a few things differently. I think it's been why we've been able to be successful in being nimble as the regulatory environment has changed, our products have changed, the company has changed. We spent a lot of time on communication at all levels of the company. So everything from, I meet with my team daily. We have a huddle to make sure that I understand everything that they're doing and they understand what I'm doing, and we're completely on the same page so there aren't surprises. We have what I call Cookies with Ken, where I meet every few weeks with people from all over the company, people who are talking to customers, technologists, and we get into the details of what is working and what isn't working. And I hear everything, and that's kind of what you have to do. You have to create an environment where people feel like they can say to the CEO, you're screwing up, and we need to do this differently. And that's when actually those Cookies with Ken are the best, is when they come in and say, I've got a problem. So I always end the Cookies with Ken with each person has to tell me one thing they like about the company and one thing they want changed about the company. And that's where I hear sort of the best stuff, and then I can communicate that more broadly. And on top of that, we add whole company town halls where we, every quarter, all get together and really talk about what's happening, and we try to share the details of what's working in the business, what isn't working, what has to get better, and what we're focused on to be successful in the near term.
How do you build a learning organization?
To a certain amount with trust, because people aren't going to put out if they don't feel like what they're doing is going to be recognized, and if there's a sense of you can try things, and if you're not successful, it's not the end of your career. So I think there's a lot of companies where if you make a mistake, you're out. And how can you have a learning organization? Because you can't learn unless you're capable of making mistakes. I mean, the best way to learn is to fail 2 or 3 times, because you're actually going to learn from that. And actually, if you fail more than 3 times, then maybe there's a deeper problem. So I think you start with that, and then we try to give people new opportunities. We try to put in place management development programs to help people. And in many ways, I think the biggest challenge in a professional's career is when they move from a functional lead to a management role. And so many people fail at that level because it's such a different set of skills. And in many ways, they have to unlearn a lot of the things that served them well when they're functional leads. So we spend a lot of time on that aspect of the career of the individual.
So you have a training program that helps people get from the functional to the managerial.
Absolutely, yes.
And how do you maintain that investment in employee learning? Because in tough times, when there's budget pressures, something's got to give. Oftentimes, it is the learning budget.
Right.
So how do you maintain that, especially when you talk about innovation being so important to your company?
Yeah, we're really lucky. We have terrific VCs in Sequoia Capital and Technology Crossover Ventures have been very supportive of us as a company and excited about where we're going. I've got a terrific board that believes in what we're trying to do, and that's given me a lot of flexibility to not necessarily have to be completely focused on just the quarter-to-quarter earnings of the business. We're trying to make meaningful investments in building a company that's going to be here for the long time and a set of products that are serving unmet needs. So I've gotten a lot of support for the kind of investments in building up the team that I think we need to do.
In your performance evaluation process, is that where you mandate formal learning plans for each of your employees? How does that develop in your company?
Yeah, actually, we do start. I mentioned our 4 cultural values of think big, always improve, do the right thing, and win together. That's part of all the reviews, and so we do biannual reviews. We set up goals biannually, but we also have development plans. So people know what their development plans, and they work with. We've got a terrific HR department, and I have to admit, so many HR departments are a little bit like a Dilbert cartoon, and they don't necessarily really believe in what they're doing in some ways. Our team is the best I've ever worked with, and the employees really look to them to help them advance in their careers. So that's been very successful in creating not just a sense of you have to do your job, but the other part of your job is thinking about how you're going to develop yourself to be better in the future.
What do you think is the most effective learning method?
I think an ability to fail is the best. I think you have to be willing to try things that are a little bit out of your capabilities, and that's the only way you can push yourself. And most of the time you succeed, but you have to be willing, and you have to be in an environment where you can have the occasional misstep, because I think that's the best way you get ahead.
How do you measure actual learning outcomes?
I'm not sure I measure actual learning outcomes other than the engagement and excitement that the employees have. I think that's the best. We actually do engagement surveys every year to understand exactly where our employees feel about the company, what they want to see different, and when we see a bunch of passionate employees that care about what we're doing as a company and are excited about their career opportunities, I think we've got it nailed.
What do you think makes a good leader?
Actually, in a lot of ways, I think it's those sort of 4 cultural attributes. I will say for myself, I found that being deeply engaged in the business is sort of the key to success. And a lot of people want to know one component of the business. Maybe they want to do strategy, or they like some aspect of operations. And I think it's that deep curiosity in all aspects of the business and wanting to get very close to what's going on that makes a great leader.
During a crisis, how do you lead differently?
That's a terrific question. I have both been a startup CEO and the CEO of a much bigger organization, and I've had certainly good times and bad times, and I think the key to success is having wildly different management strategies and styles for each. So when things are going relatively smoothly, the CEO has to get out of the way and has to let the team run things and take accountability. However, sometimes, and a good example, we lost one of our partners a number of years back that was generating about 50% of our business. That was wrenching, and so I had to get very close to the action. We worked every weekend, we worked nights, and as a team we got through it very quickly and actually ended up continuing to grow. We found new partners and continued to grow as a business. But you have to, I think, know when it's crisis mode, get in there, show the leadership that your team wants, and help them through the situation. On the other hand, let them be successful and let them take accountability for the results.
But in those moments you're talking about, in some of those rocky moments, how much is it management discipline or guts, intuition, heart carrying you through? I
think where you're leading is exactly right. At the end of the day, people have to look to the leader to see, do they really believe it? And if you're false in what you say about the crisis, for instance, we had this crisis and the CEO says, well, everything's okay, don't worry about it, we'll get by. Everybody can tell that isn't quite true. So you've got to be authentic in how you deal with crises. You have to be able to even share your fears and concerns about the situation broadly. But you also have to show the confidence that as a team, you've been there before, you've gotten through crises in the past, you'll get through them this time as you did in the past, and give them the support and energy to do what it takes to be successful.
Is there such thing as the right people?
There's certainly the wrong people. And that's pretty clear. And I think one of the hardest things is to hire the right people because, of course, people are very good in interviews and you have a very limited amount of time. So I actually think the biggest challenge that executives and companies have is recognizing the wrong people and dealing with the wrong people quickly because they can so dramatically harm an organization, in particular if they're in leadership positions. They can corrupt the culture, they can cause good people to be unhappy with the work environment. So I think it's very important to keep a very close eye on whether you have the wrong people, and then work with everyone else on their career path, because people will have ups and downs, and some people who are doing really well may struggle for a while, and you help them through it, and then other people who are maybe look like they're doing well aren't pushing themselves. So you have to find opportunities to push them further.
Ken, you've started and sold companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, what drives you?
You know, every day I find the challenges of running a company like this the thing that gets me up in the morning and keeps me excited till I go to sleep at night. I don't have a lot of hobbies. I work and I ride my bike and I play with my dog and chat with my wife. But there's not a whole lot else, and so the excitement I get and the passion I have about what we're doing and working with the fantastic executive team I have is what gets me up in the morning. Is I would like to believe gonna keep me motivated for the foreseeable future.
Ken, thank you so much for joining us today on Sardar TV.
Oh, thank you, Chitra.
That was Ken Rees, the CEO of Elevate. I'm Chitra Nabat, reporting for Sardar TV.